Spain is a place where the map tells a story all by itself. At the far western edge of Europe, facing both the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, the Iberian Peninsula has always been a crossroads where traders arrive, armies collide, languages blend, and new identities form from the ruins of the old. To understand Spain is to follow a long chain of transformations from prehistoric hunters to Roman citizens to medieval kingdoms to a global empire, and finally to the modern democracy we know today. Human habitation in Spain reaches back hundreds of thousands of years deep into prehistory. Over vast stretches of time, small communities adapted to shifting climates and landscapes, leaving traces in caves, tools, and burial sites. Eventually, these early peoples made one of the greatest leaps in human history. They settled down. In the Neolithic era, farming communities spread across the peninsula, reshaping the land through agriculture. Later, distinctive Bronze Age cultures emerged in Iberia, producing new technologies, social hierarchies, and regional traditions that hinted at the complex mosaic to come. By the dawn of the Iron Age in the first millennium BC, Iberia was not a single world, but many. Indigenous groups occupied different zones, shaped by geography and local networks. Along the Mediterranean coast lived the Iberians, tied into seaborne trade routes. In the interior and northwest were Celtic peoples, with their own languages and customs. In the west were the Lusitanians, and in the southwest the Tartessians, remembered as a wealthy culture connected to metals and commerce. The peninsula was already a patchwork of peoples, and that patchwork made it fertile ground for newcomers. Seafaring civilizations from the eastern Mediterranean established outposts along the western coastline, especially Phoenician traders. They founded settlements and trading stations that linked Iberia to wider commercial circuits, bringing new goods, ideas, and methods of exchange. Greek colonists also arrived, especially from the 7th to 6th centuries BC, building their own settlements in places that connected the peninsula to the broader Greek world. Iberia was no longer merely a frontier. It was becoming a contested meeting point between local power and overseas influence. In the centuries that followed, Carthage, originally a Phoenician colony that rose to dominate parts of North Africa, extended its influence over southern Iberia. Carthage sought control of ports, trade, and resources, absorbing older Phoenician footholds and establishing strategic bases such as Carthago Nova, known today as Cartagena. But Iberia never became simply Carthaginian. It remained a patchwork. Native tribes, coastal colonies, and rival spheres of influence pressed against each other, shifting as alliances and conflicts changed. That unstable balance shattered in the 3rd century BC, when Iberia became a battleground for two ancient superpowers, Carthage and Rome. During the Second Punic War, fought from 218 to 201 BC, Hannibal famously marched from Spain across the Alps to strike at Rome itself. The drama of that campaign is legendary, but the result was decisive. Rome ultimately defeated Carthage and expelled Carthaginian power from Iberia by 206 BC. What followed was not a quick takeover, but a long grind. Over the next 2 centuries, Roman forces gradually conquered the rest of the peninsula, facing fierce resistance from local peoples. The conquest was completed in 19 BC under Emperor Augustus, after harsh campaigns in the far north. With that, Hispania became firmly integrated into the Roman world. Rome did not rule only through legions. It built cities spread across the territory and roads stitched regions together. Aqueducts, infrastructure, and urban planning reshaped daily life. Hispania's economy flourished, exporting grain, olive oil, wine, and metals throughout the empire. Over time, Latin language and Roman customs took root, and many communities became increasingly Romanized. Hispania even produced figures who mattered at the center of power: philosophers, poets, and emperors. And in the late Roman period, Christianity expanded rapidly, becoming dominant across the region. But the Western Roman Empire began to collapse in the early 5th century, and the peninsula entered another era of upheaval. Migrating Germanic peoples crossed into Iberia in waves. Vandals, Suebi, and Alans seized different regions, with the Suebi forming a kingdom in Galicia and the Vandals holding parts of the south. Then another force arrived, the Visigoths, entering around 415 AD. They gradually unified the peninsula under their rule, eventually centering their kingdom in Toledo. They subdued rival groups and removed other enclaves of foreign control. By the late 6th century, the Visigothic kingdom governed nearly all Iberia, acting as a successor state that preserved many Roman laws and cultural habits while forging a new political order. Then came 711 A, a turning point that permanently altered Spain's history. An army of Muslim Arabs and Berbers from North Africa crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and landed in Iberia. They took advantage of internal Visigothic conflict and won a decisive battle against King Roderick. In the years that followed, Muslim forces swept rapidly across the peninsula. By 718, most of Iberia was under Muslim control. The region became known as Al-Andalus, while a small Christian holdout in the mountainous north endured, eventually forming the nucleus of the Kingdom of Asturias. Under Muslim rule, Iberia entered a vibrant new phase. At first, Al-Andalus was part of a vast caliphate, but political changes in the wider Islamic world soon reshaped it. An independent Muslim polity emerged, first as the Emirate of Cordoba and Tiwalil. Cordoba became famous for institutions of learning, libraries, and an urban culture that stood among the most advanced in Europe at the time. Al-Andalus was also economically dynamic. New crops and irrigation techniques transformed agriculture. Craft production gained renown, including textiles and metalwork. And the era left a deep architectural legacy, structures and styles that continue to shape Spain's cultural imagination centuries later. Yet political unity did not last. In the early 11th century, the Caliphate of Cordoba fractured into smaller principalities called tifas. Rivalry between them weakened Muslim power and created openings for the northern Christian kingdoms, which had grown from earlier footholds. Over centuries, borders shifted back and forth. Alliances formed across religious lines when convenient, and ambitious leaders exploited the chaos. But by the 13th century, Christian kingdoms consolidated and pushed south in a long campaign remembered as the Reconquista. Muslim rulers sought help from powerful dynasties in North Africa, but the balance tipped decisively after 1212 at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. Christian forces surged, and by around the mid-13th century, only the Emirate of Granada remained as a Muslim enclave in the far south. Granada survived for roughly 2 more centuries through diplomacy, tribute, and careful political maneuvering. Meanwhile, Christian Spain continued to consolidate. In 1469, the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon united 2 major crowns, laying foundations for a more unified Spanish monarchy. In 1492, their forces captured Granada, ending centuries of Muslim rule in Iberia. That same year also marked a new and darker drive for religious uniformity, as policies targeted communities who would not conform. In 1492 marked Spain's outward leap. The monarchy sponsored Christopher Columbus's westward voyage, opening the door to Spain's entry into the Americas. Over the following decades, Spanish expeditions and conquests created a vast overseas empire. Wealth, especially precious metals, flowed into Spain, fueling power, ambition, and conflict. In 1516, the throne passed to Charles I, who also became Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, presiding over an immense inheritance across Europe and the expanding Spanish domains. His empire was so large that people said the sun never set on it, but managing that scale brought enormous strain. Spain fought major conflicts across Europe and the seas, defended Catholic power during an era of religious upheaval, and confronted rival states and empires. There were moments of triumph and moments of disaster, but even at its height, the costs were mounting. In the 17th century, Spain's political and economic fortunes began to decline amid relentless wars and internal pressures. The Iberian Union with Portugal ended, revolts erupted, and territorial losses accumulated. When the last Habsburg king, Charles II, died in 1700 without an heir, the War of the Spanish Succession erupted. The conflict ended with a new dynasty, the Bourbons, and significant concessions, including territories changing hands. Under Bourbon rulers, Spain pursued reforms and modernization programs inspired by Enlightenment ideas, investing in administration, infrastructure, and economic renewal. Then Napoleon upended Europe. In 1808, France seized the Spanish throne and installed Joseph Bonaparte, triggering mass uprising and a brutal peninsular war. Spain ultimately drove out the French, but the wider shock weakened imperial control. In the Americas, independence movements surged, and by the 1820s, Spain lost most of its colonies, dealing a profound blow to wealth and global standing. The 19th century at home was turbulent. Civil wars, political experiments, coups, restorations alongside uneven modernization through railways and industry. In 1898, another disaster struck. War with the United States ended with Spain losing major remaining colonies, sparking national soul-searching. The 20th century brought more instability, dictatorship, the fall of the monarchy, and the Second Republic with sweeping reforms. Polarization intensified, and in 1936, a military coup attempt ignited the Spanish Civil War. After years of devastating conflict, Francisco Franco's forces won in 1939, and Spain entered decades of authoritarian rule. The regime repressed dissent, promoted a centralized national identity, and limited regional languages and autonomy. Spain stayed officially neutral in World War II, and gradually re-entered international politics during the Cold War, when Western powers valued its anti-communist stance. Economic reforms in the mid-20th century fueled rapid growth, the Spanish miracle, transforming society even as repression persisted. When Franco died in 1975, Spain faced another crossroads. Instead of freezing the old system in place, Spain transitioned toward democracy. Political parties were legalized, elections were held, and a new constitution in 1978 established a parliamentary monarchy and recognized regional autonomy. In the decades that followed, Spain integrated deeply into European institutions, experienced new prosperity, and gained global visibility. The financial crisis of 2008 hit hard, but recovery followed. Today, Spain continues to navigate challenges, regional tensions, political debate, and questions about institutions. Yet it stands as a stable democracy shaped by centuries of upheaval. Spain's story is not a straight line. It is a sequence of layers, prehistoric roots, Roman foundations, medieval fusion, imperial reach, and modern reinvention. And that is what makes it so compelling, because every era left something behind, and together, those traces still define the country's identity today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and then we see you in the next video.